tactics and strategy. Tactics and strategy. Anyways, welcome back to Metalben's Chronicles for another album review. And we are doing this live here on YouTube. So I will get to the comments here later on. And we got Karen Trope in the house. Hope I pronounced your last name right. So yes, anyways, of course, we are going to review the big one that came out this past Friday on September 3rd, of course. The long-awaited 17th studio album by legendary heavy metal band Iron Maiden, who really needs no introduction. If you don't know who Iron Maiden is, you're living under a rock. Definitely one of the biggest heavy metal bands, probably literally in the top 5 when it comes to the biggest heavy metal bands of all time. You know, up there with, Sabbath, Judas Priest, Metallica, and the list goes on and on. So yes, right here it is. Senjutsu, the new Iron Maiden album, meaning tactics and strategy in Japanese. Now, I'm going to do a separate video on these tomorrow. Got it on CD also. Right now, this is just a standard review. I will talk about the CD and the vinyl tomorrow in a separate video, which will not be live, by the way. Let's get on to the album. Now, the album was recorded back in 2019. Yes, so this album was actually recorded 2 years ago. The reason I'm thinking Maiden did not release it due to COVID, and the pandemic, I'm pretty sure that's why the album never came out, much sooner. Because I'm pretty sure this album was probably slated for a 2020 release, But either or, we got it here in 2021. Unexpectedly, of course, back in July, we had The Writings on the Wall drop, which I did a review for it. It's my most viewed video so far on the channel. Yeah, that video has literally almost 1,900 views. But yeah, so right now, we're going to talk about the new album, and I should talk about Strategio too, another single that was released prior to the album coming out. Well, right now you're going to find out my opinion on the new album. Produced by Kevin Shirley. Of course, co-produced by Steve Harris. The album clocks in at 81 minutes and 52 seconds. 81 minutes and 53 seconds, So it is a bit shorter than the Book of Souls. Yeah. And this came out on Parlophone Warner in the US. So yeah, let's get into the album lineup. Obviously you got Steve Harris, the co-founder of Iron Maiden, the only original member technically, if you want to go all the way back to 1975 and on through, with all the different lineup changes before the first album. Steve Harris is the sole original member of Iron Maiden, obviously. Then you got Dave Murray on rhythm and lead guitars, the second longest member of Iron Maiden. Been there since 76, He was out of the band for a little bit in that time period, came back around 78, I believe. And he's been in Iron Maiden since. Then you got Bruce Dickinson on vocals. Yes, the air raid siren on vocals. That's right. And what more can be said about Bruce Dickinson, one of the greatest heavy metal frontmen of all freaking time. Then you got Adrian Smith on guitars. Lead rhythm guitars, you know the drill. Then you got Janet Garris, probably the least popular member of Iron Maiden on lead and rhythm guitars. Also, me, I've never really had a problem with Janet. It is what it is. And on drums, you got Nico McBrain to fill out the lineup for Iron Maiden. The lineup that's been around for 22 years now, since 1999, obviously. All right, so now we're going to get into the album. Let's go to the very first track here, the opening track, Strategio. I apologize for that. Senjutsu, the title track. I apologize for that. Senjutsu, the title track. Yeah, there's going to be some mistakes here since we're doing this live. But yeah, Senjutsu, the title track's live. Quite different indeed. I mean, this is territory Iron Maiden has never really went in. It's very tribal. You know, it's got some very good tribal drum beats throughout the track. You know, I mean, the rhythm guitar playing's pretty heavy too on this track. I mean, yeah, it's mid-paced. It doesn't really speed up or anything, but all in all, I think it's a pretty damn good opener to the album. I think it's quite different, you know. And yeah, I mean, it's very different for Iron Maiden. You know, this was written by Adrian Smith and Steve Harris, which is kind of odd for them to have, you know, writing credits together on an Iron Maiden album. You know, usually it's Dickinson and Harris or Smith and Harris, you know, writing the tracks. But this time it's Steve Harris and, you know, Adrian Smith who wrote this track. And I think Adrian does some really good guitar leads on this track, you know. And it is quite different. Like I said, it doesn't sound like any other Iron Maiden track, you know, past or present. So I think it's a pretty damn good way to open this album. And the track clocks in at 8 minutes and 20 seconds. Yeah. Just glancing through the comments there for a minute. All right, cool. Anyways, welcome to the stream, everybody. Good to see you all here. Anyways, so now we're going to talk about Strategio, written by Janet Garris and Steve Harris. You know, one of the shorter tracks on the album, you know, clocking in at 4 minutes and 59 seconds long. You know, it's probably one of the more straightforward tracks on this album. You know, it's got the gallop in it. You know, parts of it kind of remind me of The Evil That Men Do a little bit. You know, yeah, pretty much sounds like typical modern Maiden too. You know, now it's got a pretty cool synth part in it. Like in the middle of the track, there's a really cool like synth part in it. It's kind of like a little build-up part, going into the guitar solo or whatnot. You know, it's kind of cool. It's an okay track. Not one of my favorite tracks on here. It's okay. I guess this track, if I were to pinpoint what album this probably could have been on, maybe the Book of Souls. You know, it's an okay track though. It's not bad. It's not one of my favorites on the album. It's definitely my least favorite of the two singles. So then we get into the first single released. The Writing on the Wall, clocking in at 6 minutes and 13 seconds. You know, I already reviewed this track. You know, when it came out, it got mixed reviews. It's quite different too. Again, it's Iron Maiden going into different territories, you know, with the Southern rock type of beginning. You know, it's kind of weird. I came up with a term for this because parts of it remind me of Mother Russia too. So with the Southern Rock thing and the little Mother Russia thing, I came up with the term "Sweet Home Mother Russia." For that part. Yeah, "Sweet Home Mother Russia" is what I came up with for that part. Yeah, it's definitely the best one out of the two singles. Yeah, I do like the track. Now, notably too, before I go on, like if you listen to these tracks on YouTube, it's not going to sound the same naturally. Like literally, pick it up on CD, pick it up on vinyl. It sounds way better than what I thought it would sound like. And yeah, I think the production on this album, now I was a little critical of the production on the writing on the wall and Strategio when I heard him through YouTube, but as I've listened to him on CD, the production definitely sounds much better. It's definitely way better compared to the YouTube versions. In fact, I'm going to be straight up honest with you. I think this is the best Kevin Shirley production out of the Iron Maiden albums. The guitars sound much better on this album. The drums sound fucking phenomenal on this album. I do think this is Nico McBrain's best drum sound. That's going to be controversial to a lot of people, but after listening to the album 3 times now, I do think this is definitely Nico's best drum sound on an Iron Maiden album. And you really got to listen to the album deeply to pinpoint what Nico's doing on the drums, because he's definitely doing different things on the drums on this album. I noticed he's doing different fills. The tribal thing in the first track, obviously. There's just little things you noticed that Nico's doing a little different compared to past Iron Maiden albums. But yeah, I think Nico's drumming is freaking great on this album. The production's definitely better than I thought it was. Yeah. So moving on, we got. Yeah, we don't have to talk much more about the writing on the wall. 6 minutes and 13 seconds. So. All right, so then we get into track 4. The first big Steve Harris track, "Lost in a Lost World." Okay, now this track, I'm going to say right now, is the weakest track on the album. It begins with this, like, very melodic intro. It's very, spacey sounding. It's definitely, not the greatest intro to a song. I mean, when the song does pick up, though, it goes into a more X Factor type of feel. And the thing I noticed with this track, on this track, they definitely sound like they're repeating riffs from the X Factor, particularly. In fact, there's a point in this track where they're doing that stop-start drum thing, kind of like on the track "Virus" from way back when. Yeah, it's like a do 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 do. It sounds very repetitive. It does sound like something we've already heard before. So yeah, this track's not one of my favorites on the album. Unfortunately, I didn't really care for it. Clocks in at 9 minutes and 31 seconds. Solely written by Steve Harris. And I do think "Lost in a Lost World" is the weakest track on this album. So moving on, we go into "Days of Future Past," the shortest track on the album, clocking in at 4 minutes and 3 seconds. Now, this track is basically just straightforward. Really, probably, the second track on the album that's just straightforward. There's no melodic intro, there's no melodic outro. It's a pretty decent track. I think it's a pretty damn good track. Now, this one was also written by Steve Harris. Now this is a track where I'd think like Adrian Smith or, Dave Murray or somebody would have written it, but no, it was written by Harris. Yeah, it's a short track. It's okay. It's good. Not great, but it's good. You know, not much else to really say about that track. It's got a pretty catchy chorus. Then we get into Days of Future Past, clocking in at, or I'm sorry, I already said that. Time Machine. The track Time Machine, also written by Janet Garris and Steve Harris, clocking in at 7 minutes and 9 seconds. Now, the first time I listened to this track, I did not care for it, but there were parts of the track I did like. Now, on my third listen of this track, the track is really growing on me. I think it's actually a pretty darn good track. You know, Again, it's kind of different. The melody's a little different on this track compared to like some of the melodies you would hear on past Maiden tracks. Yeah, it's got the slow intro, but like when it picks up and gets a little heavier, it's kind of interesting. It's pretty progressive. There are some time changes going on. All in all, I think it's a pretty decent track. So that pretty much ends the first half of the album. Well, disc one. So then we move over to disc two. And to me, one of the strongest freaking tracks on this album, Darkest Hour. I love the subject matter going on when it pertains to this track about Winston Churchill. Definitely a track about war, which, Iron Maiden's been notorious for writing tracks about war in the past. You know, Tracks like Fortunes of War off of, The X Factor, Aces High, you know. Now, this track is pretty melodic the whole way through, but it's written very well. Yeah, I think this is an excellent track. Now, the vibe I get on this track, too, it's not really Iron Maiden like, it's more like Bruce Dickinson solo. And it's written by Smith and Harrison, too. Or, excuse me, it's written by Smith and Dickinson also. Clocking in at 7 minutes and 20 seconds, Yeah, this is a really good track. When I listen to this track, I kind of think, maybe Tears of a Dragon from Bruce Dickinson's solo album. A little bit of Wasted Love. You know, it's a dark song. It's definitely a depressing track. But man, it's a really, really good track. The melodies on this track are amazing. And Adrian Smith is playing some great guitar solos on this track. And I like how, you get like waves and seagulls, to end out the track and to begin the track. It's pretty cool. Yeah, definitely one of my favorites. In fact, these last three tracks are my favorite tracks on this freaking album. That's right. The three big epics. And the first one being Death of the Celts, clocking in at 10 minutes and 20 seconds long. Man. I've seen some people say they don't care for this track. I mean, it's definitely getting compared to the Klansman. I can definitely hear the Klansman in this track. I think this is actually a really freaking good track, to be honest. Especially the midsection when the solos kick in. I've seen a lot of people complain too that there's way too many solos on this freaking album. Well, I guess for me being a guitar player, that doesn't really bother me much because the freaking solo break in this track is freaking excellent. I mean, it definitely, I think that solo break kind of goes back to a little bit of Seventh Son of a Seventh Son. If I were to do comparisons, obviously mixed with the Klansman from Virtual 11. Yeah, I think this is a pretty damn good epic. And I don't really have too much more to say about it. Again, it starts off with the intro, then it ends with the outro, typical Maiden in the modern era. However, I think it's done way freaking better on this album compared to some of the other albums. You know, so yeah, Death of the Celts, definitely one of my favorites on this album. You know, then we get into the other epic, the longest track on the album, coming in at 12 minutes and 39 seconds long. The Parchment, also written by Steve Harris. Now, this track right here, definitely has that Egyptian feel to it. A lot of repetition on this track. Yes. Yes, it's definitely repetitious. However, to me, this track kind of goes back to Power Slave. Or maybe the track Dance of Death a little bit. It's definitely really epic. It's got that Egyptian feel, like I said. Now, notably, too, I noticed there's parts of this track that remind me of Rainbow. Like you can hear the Rainbow influence on this track. Pertainly a track like Gates of Babylon from Long Live Rock and Roll. I can really hear that influence in parts of this track. Especially around, I think it's the 7-minute mark. You can really hear it. Now, a lot of people's complaint with this track, too, would be there's too many solos, and it just drags on and on. However, I was not bored with this track. Not at all. I like the dark Egyptian atmosphere of it. Yeah, around the 9-minute mark, yeah, it does speed up. Which might be kind of late into the track to speed up, but, it is what it is. I think all in all, it's a damn good track. Then we get into the last track, Hell on Earth, clocking in at 11 minutes and 19 seconds to end off the album. Yeah, this track right here, man, again, another epic track. It's really weird for a title like Hell on Earth. It starts out with a pretty happy intro, but then it gets pretty heavy and galloping. And Bruce sounds freaking great on this track. Again, man, another track that has great galloping riffs, great lead guitar work by all three guitar players. And yeah, I think this track is well written. I really enjoy it. And I think it's a great way to end off the album. Yeah, these three epics, I was not bored with them. Not bored at all. I think it's the best part of the album, to be honest, and I normally would not say that compared to how the last few Iron Maiden albums have been. Like you go back to albums like Life After Death, not Life After Death, A Matter of Life and Death, The Final Frontier, which I think is the worst Iron Maiden album. Even the Book of Souls had tracks on it that were kind of like whatever. When it comes to some of the epic stuff or just some of the tracks in general, even Brave New World has a couple tracks on it I'm not big on. I mean, yeah, I did say I don't really care for Lost in a Lost World much. I mean, there's parts in that track that are good, but to me there's a lot of repetition in that song, but the rest of these tracks I think are pretty darn good for the most part. And I do think the last 4 tracks on this album are easily the best. Easily the best. Yeah. I know a lot of people aren't going to agree with this, but that's fine. We're allowed to agree to disagree, right? And be civil and adult about it. I mean, like I said, my gripe with this album, though, and it's been this way for a long time when it pertains to Iron Maiden, I do wish, like everybody else, there were some faster paced tracks on this album. At least a couple. I wish there was an Aces High on this freaking album, or a Purgatory or a what's another good example here? I don't know, a track like Drifter, or I don't know, maybe Running Free. I wish there was something like that on this album. Unfortunately, there's not. People got to remember too. This is a different Iron Maiden. This is not the Iron Maiden of 35 years ago. Obviously, their sound has matured throughout the years. You know, and honestly, I never expect Iron Maiden to go back to their classic sound from their first 5 albums. I don't expect it. Not in this stage in their career. I don't expect it at all. So people wanting that Iron Maiden, I don't think you're ever going to get it. I mean, it just seems like after 25 years now, maybe longer. With the albums Iron Maiden that's been putting out, it's obvious Steve Harris's mind's in a different mindset. You know, when it pertains to writing songs. I mean, it is what it is. What can you do? So yeah, anybody wanting like a Number of the Beast, a Killers, a Peace of Mind, or a Power Slave, or even the debut album, we're never going to get that again. Let's just face it. We're never going to get that again out of Iron Maiden. Iron Maiden's one of them bands you got to really sit down and listen to their music. Even in the modern era, you got to really sit down and listen to it. Yeah, you might find stuff you like, you might find stuff you don't like. It is what it is. I mean, granted, it would definitely be nice if Iron Maiden would go back to more of that classic sound where, the songs are a bit shorter, have a bit more energy to them. But anyway, it is what it is. I thoroughly enjoyed this album. I do think this album's better than the Book of Souls. It's definitely better than the last four or five Iron Maiden albums. So I'm going to give this album, thinking here, I'll be generous and give the album an 8.5 out of 10. 8.5 out of 10 is my ranking. It's not going to be album of the year. It might actually make my top 10, though. I do think this is the best Iron Maiden album in the modern era. So yeah, that's my review. Gonna go through the comments section before I leave here. Yeah, let me go through and read the comments before I log out of here. We can scroll up here. Okay, here we go. All right, so we got Karen. Good evening, everyone. This is Karen. I've been a new subscriber for 1 month, and this is my first chat. Hello, Mr. Ben. Hello, Karen. Good to have you here. Karen says also, just wanted to say, I love the new album. Think it's better than the last one, but I hope they retire after this one because that way they can do so in dignity and keep their legacy intact. I would have to agree with that. This is the last Iron Maiden album. I'd be happy because, like I said before, we can wish for it all we want, but we're never going to get another Iron Maiden album like the first 5. It's just not going to happen. I just don't want them. I just don't want them and Metallica to be the heavy metal version of the Beach Boys and play until they're 80 years old. I think I would have to agree with that. Yeah, Metallica's a whole nother story. I agree, though. I agree, Karen. Rock groups should be like shooting stars. Seagull Rock says. Yeah, man, I agree with that, too. So we got Karen and Mr. Ben. My last name is pronounced like the first trout. Okay, but that's all right. People say it different all the time. laughing, laughing out loud. Stay safe and careful. Will do. So it's Karen Troup. Okay. Mean Metal Mike in the chat room. Yo, Ben. Yo, Mike. What's up? Saw you over there on Ralph's stream. I did watch it before going live. Okay. Let's see if I can scroll down. Why can't I not scroll down anymore? Okay, I got it. We got the Sentinel here. Yo, I did a trick where if you listen to the album at 125 speed on YouTube, all the songs sound way better and faster. Gotta laugh at that one. Seagull Rock Squawk. Young bands have passion. As we get older, once perspective changes. That's very true, and Carrot says no fish. All right, well, that's the comments so far. You know what? That's it for this review of the new Iron Maiden album, Senjutsu. Was hoping to have more people in the comments section, but it is what it is. But anyways, yeah, I'm going to do a separate video on the CD and vinyl versions of Senjutsu and, show you what the vinyls and CDs look like for those who don't have them or didn't purchase them yet. That video should come tomorrow. Might do a live stream tomorrow night. I know the stream's pretty short, but, it is what it is. Anyway, so yeah, stay tuned for more here on Metalben's Chronicles. Like, share, subscribe. Help get these freaking videos out there. Until next time, salute and keep it metal. Where's my outro at?